Right, we are now going to hear about the Value Toolkit, which has been developed to change the way the construction industry thinks about and measures value. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Jeremy Galpin, who is Social Value Consultancy Lead at Costain. Jeremy.
Thank you, everybody. So it's a pleasure to be here to talk about making value-based outcome decisions real. My name is Jeremy Galpin. I am the Social Value Consultancy Lead for Costain. Let us not be cynics. There's probably not that many people who are cynics in the audience, or you maybe wouldn't be here. But this quote, a cynic was a man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. And I'm sure we all know some people in that box. So let's not be cynics about the opportunities we have to change and deliver projects that deliver true value for society. And looking at those projects at a systems level is absolutely critical. At an integrated level is absolutely critical. But what is value? This is a quote from Mariana Mazzucato. She talks about, I use value in terms of the process by which wealth is created. It is a flow that results in actual things, whether tangible or intangible. And I think that's a really good description of the Value Toolkit, which is a process that delivers value through projects. We're fortunate in infrastructure. A lot of what we do is really tangible, but a lot of the impact and the outcomes are quite intangible in terms of social impact. Some of you will be familiar with Kate Raworth's work around donut economics. And she talks about the importance of the diagrams that we use to shape our decision-making and the economic framework in which we work. And she describes this donut, and the donut is the light blue, and it's a ring donut, by the way, not a jam donut, the light blue sustainable space for all stakeholders. At the core, at the hole in the donut, is that social foundation, the minimum acceptable level of well-being that we need to address for society. And the outside of the donut is that ecological ceiling. We must not contribute to critical planetary degradation. We know we're breaching that all the time. So she says we need to live in this donut, whether as organizations or countries as a world. And she makes the point that the diagrams we use have shaped the way we treat economy and the way we make decisions about infrastructure. So I think the Value Toolkit provides a new diagram, and I'm going to show you that at the end of the slide. But just before we come to that, Matt's articulated very clearly the importance of understanding what outcomes we're trying to deliver with our infrastructure, in particular our cities in his case. There's two simple diagrams just to illustrate this point, which I'm sure we're well aware of, that in order to deliver outcomes for society, we have to get those decisions made right at the beginning of the process, even before the design, at the optioneering stage, where we're working out what problem we're trying to solve. And that might be integrated transport in Manchester, whatever that problem is. Because as we go through that project phase, from options to design to delivery and operations, those opportunities to deliver improved outcomes reduce progressively through that cycle. And the second diagram is about how both the intrinsic and extrinsic value and of outcomes from an asset accumulate over the time of the asset. So that means a number of things. Firstly, we need to be looking at our assets across their whole life cycle, minimum 60 years. Otherwise, we're not really valuing those outcomes. And we need to understand what is intrinsic and what is extrinsic. And what I mean by that in social value terms is the intrinsic social value. If you take the Tideway Tunnel as an example, is its purpose, which is to clean up the River Thames. That delivers huge value for society throughout the operation of that tunnel into the future. The extrinsic social value benefits are the local employment, the volunteering, the community investment we did while we built that tunnel. That is important too, but we need to make sure that both these elements of value are kept in mind, and particularly the current policy environment can push us into the extrinsic social value, which is actually much less important when you look at the long term of the infrastructure project. So the value toolkit, the value process needs to start right at the beginning. The value toolkit has been developed in partnership with over 200 experts from across industry and government. It's embedded in HM Treasury's approach. It's in the construction playbook. So there's a real opportunity now to build on this work that's been done and to use it to take a systems approach to our major project delivery. So what are the key steps? What is the process flow that the value toolkit requires? Firstly, it's about identifying those strategic value drivers. And that includes the UN SDGs. It includes government policy, which is developing and changing all the time. It includes local policy drivers. And really importantly, it also includes the stakeholder voice, how you're listening to that locally and you're embedding that in your decision making. And the value toolkit is a collaborative process where you work together with the client and look at each stages of the process. So the second bit is about developing outcome statements. What are the outcomes we're aiming to achieve with this piece of infrastructure when it's in operation throughout its life cycle? And the next stage is about prioritizing and rationalizing those outcomes. What is achievable for this particular bit of project? How important is biodiversity versus carbon? How important is jobs versus the operational outcomes from this baggage system? And that prioritization process leads to a value profile which shows how you're balancing those priorities at a systems level that you can just then explain to all the stakeholders and your local communities. You then need to set up measures of success. So if we're going to make decisions about building projects on the basis of social outcomes, environmental outcomes, and economic outcomes, we have to decide what metrics we're going to collect against each of those outcomes and what data we need to collect on that. And if we can do that well at a systems level, and we can capture that data through the operational process of the asset, then we can begin to see whether the commitments we made in the business case at the start actually bear fruit and actually true. And we can hopefully build trust in the process of decision-making around infrastructure. We need to embed this process right at the start of the project, as we've said. But it doesn't mean we can't do it now. So it's really importantly, the work we're doing with customers, regardless of the stage of their project, as long as you're not into delivery and operation, we can use this value process to help look at where we are, what outcomes we're trying to deliver, and how we can maximize that value for society. Crucially, it needs to be embedded in the procurement process, both by the client, but then into the supply chain process, so the whole supply chain is engaged in delivery. And finally, we need to monitor performance into the operation of the asset. How is that asset performing against the commitments we made? How are the mums and toddlers getting around in our cities? How are our housing performing in terms of the well-being of the people living in them? We've got to get better at doing this at a systems level. So that is the diagram I want you to take away from today. This is the diagram that can shape the approach we take to our projects. How about if we had that value profile for every single piece of infrastructure we're building, and we had it also at an integrated level in terms of what we're trying to achieve across our integrated infrastructure? The natural, social, human, and produced capital is referenced in the Green Book. You might not like that. You might like a 6 capital model. Let's not be cynics. Let's get on board. Let's make this work. It's a real opportunity. On the 12th of July and 13th of July, there will be 2 events with the IPA and ourselves taking forward, and those involved in the Value Toolkit, taking forward the Value Toolkit to the next stages. If you'd like to be part of that next process, please do visit either the IPA stand or the Costain stand and let us know you'll be interested. The Value Toolkit is a route to better value. It's externally verified, industry developed, not owned by any of us, owned by us all. It's an evolving scorecard that looks at each stage of the project at a systems level, and we can use it to communicate the complexity of the decision-making we're making, the balance we're aiming to achieve with our infrastructure, and ultimately make better decisions for society and people. Thank you very much.